We're learning Torah today about breaking free from exile. In case you didn't feel like you were in exile, now we feel like we're in exile. So maybe last year you might have learned about the Egypt and this Passover, and it might have been an academic concept about, well, there's a concept of being in exile, and we were living very privileged lives in a very comfortable existence here in the United States of America. But I think that today Jews can very much identify with the existence of living in a state of exile. It's something we can all relate to when we're surrounded by hate. And I want to tell you something. The Holocaust didn't just start one rosy night. Didn't just start like suddenly. The Holocaust started when fine people tolerated hate. When hate was first tolerated, and then it quickly grew, and eventually it mutated into full-blown murder, genocide. And that's what we're going through. But anyways, I digress. We're talking today about a very personal approach to exile, which is why the Mishnah directs us to recall always, every single day. There's two versions of this Mishnah. In every generation and in every day, a Jew has to recall, every person has to remember, to regard himself as if he personally had left Egypt. Now, why is it important to remember that? First of all, there's two parts to this. You have to remember that you are in Egypt. And number two, you got to make sure that you get out of Egypt. What does it mean to be in Egypt? We discussed this at great length so far, that we explained it to mean that your godly soul is trapped or controlled or governed, is really the word, by the animal soul. Your godly soul cannot do whatever it wants. It needs the participation and the begrudging approval of the animal soul, whereas the animal soul does not actually need the godly soul to do what it wants. It's kind of like a horse and a rider. Anywhere that the rider wants to go, he has to have the horse's approval. Wherever the horse wants to go, he doesn't need the rider to agree. You can just stay right where you are. I'm doing my thing. And that's probably why there are far more people in the world that are expressing their animal soul than there are people expressing their godly soul. But it's actually by divine design. It's the way that God created the world. So don't get disheartened or disappointed that there's so few people in shul compared to people on the golf course today, because that's the way God designed it. It's actually a default setting for the horse to dominate over the rider, unless the rider is able to figure out a way to control the horse. Now, until now, we've learned tools as to how we can. We've discussed the problem. We've spoken about the fact that we're in exile, and remember, the word Egypt means limitation or constraints. So Egypt means that you're in a hostage situation. And that's what the state of our godly soul is. Our godly soul is a soul, the same soul as Moses. And that soul is stuck, can't do whatever it wants. It's being held hostage. Don't forget the hostages. But how do you break free? How does the godly soul break free from its state of captivity? Today's Torah study is sponsored by Karina Nadel, Karina Basteva, Kayla, and Bunim in honor of a successful surgery today. Today's Rosh Chodesh Iyar. Iyar is an acronym for Ani Hashem Rafecha. I am the Lord your healer. I am God your healer. May we all experience healing from a world that is suffering so much.
Amen.
Thank you. So, the Chassidus of the Frierdiker Rebbe today is, we're hopefully going to finish the discourse with a beautiful, clear guidance, directive as to how we can break free. And the answer is the natural dominance of the mind over the heart. It's the natural dominance of your intellect over your emotions. This is how God created us, where intellect controls emotions. That's only so long. It's like a horse and a rider. Who controls who? The rider controls the horse, right? As long as the rider asserts himself, the human will control the horse. But what happens if the human does not believe in himself and you approach a horse and you don't do so with confidence? What happens? The horse can tell. It's amazing. That's why there's such a thing called equine therapy, which is great therapy for children and adults that are struggling with self-esteem issues. The horse, what? Special needs, even not special needs, even regular needs kids. What happens is that the horse reads your emotion in the most magnificent way. Horses are just magnificent creatures, and they can read your energy. And if you can learn to stroke the horse with confidence, then the horse becomes submissive. But if you are fearful, then the horse goes all nervous and goes crazy. It's a beautiful thing to observe, right? What? Dogs also? I'm not aware. Okay. The same thing goes for the beast within you, the horse within you, and that's your animal soul. If you can approach the animal soul with confidence and say, okay, it's time for me to get on top of you and use your power for the purpose for which we both were created, fantastic. But if you're going to come in all meek, confused, afraid, anxious, not knowing where you're going, having no clue why you're here, who do you think is going to dominate, the horse or the rider? Of course, right? Intellect controls the emotion when intellect is asserted. Otherwise, intellect just serves the intellect just serves the emotion, like an animal who uses his intellect just to figure out where the grass is greener. That's all, right? Doesn't think too much. A human being uses his brain to figure out how he can solve the world's problems. And if we can just engage that point to be able to use our intellect, we will then be able to steer our animal soul, the horse, to be able to ride, to allow the godly soul to ride upon it to heights that he could never have reached on his own. How do you do that? How do you use your intellect? This is something which people don't talk about very much. And that's by thinking. Thinking. You know, if you want to get your, so a joke. I'm not going to take credit of this. But if you ever want to get your wife's attention, what do you have to do?
Shower.
Sit on the couch. I need your wife's attention. Just sit on the couch and do nothing. She'll find something for you to do, right? Sometimes my wife asks me, what are you doing? I say, I'm thinking. No, what are you doing? I'm thinking. You know, it's an actual thing that we do. It's just thinking. In my house, you know, I have a lot of action in my house, thank God. So I actually built a room, which is my thinking room. Because I can't. Otherwise, if I'm trying to think in the living room or it's anywhere else, it's like an airport over there. But I created a room. It's like a little room. This is Daddy's thinking room. I go in there. Doesn't fit a lot of people. By design, this is where I think. And it's critical. It's important to be able to think. Because an amazing thing happens when you think. Now, we live in a world, by the way, where billions of dollars are invested every day for the most precious commodity in existence. And I believe that is your attention. Billions of dollars are being spent on getting your attention. Just think about how many ads are being placed every day. Billboards, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, newspapers, all those mailers, God knows why they send them to you, as if anybody reads them, right? TV ads, radio, everywhere. Everybody's trying to get your attention. It's the most precious resource you have. The question is, what are you doing with it? Do you spend, how much of your day is spent on thinking about things that you want to think about, which I'm going to call proactive thinking, versus reactive thinking? Reactive thinking is like thinking about just stuff around you. Like, oh, a person in a yellow car. Oh, an airplane. Oh, I see a picture, right? But how much of that time are you spending thinking about things that you want to think about? Focused thinking. Now, I'm going to call focused thinking meditation. A lot of people think that meditation is something that they have to pay a lot of money to go to some very exclusive retreat, some very faraway place to be able to meditate. But that's not true. You don't have to do that. Thinking happens the moment you turn your phone off. It's a beautiful experience. You just turn your phone off and you just are now unreachable. I know it sounds crazy, but it's okay to be unreachable. Thank God for Shabbos. And then you just close your eyes and now you think about something. What are you going to think about? What are you going to think about? You need to have what to think about. You can't think about nothing. You have to have material. It's like a train. It's like a coal. What's called a coal train? Well, steam engine, right? You got to put coal in the fire to be able to keep the train moving. You can't just think about nothing, because then you're going to be thinking about nothing. You got to be thinking about something specific. So what you want to do is, this is the purpose of Chassidus. Chassidus is filled with material to think about. It's there for you to meditate on. This is not edutainment. It is material for you to think about. And everything that we learn about, friends, if you come across something that inspires you, own it. What I want you to, and that's all we learn this in the mornings. And it's one thing to hear a sermon. You hear a sermon, okay, maybe you'll remember a reference. Maybe you'll look it up later. Maybe you won't look it up later. Whatever. But when you learn around the table like we are right now, this is recorded. You can re-watch this video. You can take the book and reread the book. And I want to encourage you to read it 7 times. When was the last time you read anything 7 times? You've ever read a newspaper article 7 times? You have? Have you read a newspaper 7 times? Have you ever read a book 7 times? People give me books. And I always say to them, do me a favor. I hope this is a gift and not a loan. Because if it's a loan, don't give it to me. I become very emotionally attached to books. So I'm just making a disclaimer right here, right now on video. If you ever loan me a book, please don't expect it back. It's not coming back to you. It's not going to happen. Very rare that I give a book. If I really don't like it, I'll probably try to get rid of it. But it's very unusual. I read books over and over and over and over. I love that because it's like very beautiful. Somebody put his life's work into a piece of reading. I want to read it, and if it's good, I'm going to read it more than once. Now, Torah is something you want to read multiple times. This is godly wisdom. Think about that for a moment. Right? Think about it. So you want to read J.K. Rowling. Okay, you're reading J.K. Rowling's imagination. Wonderful. But if you're going to take godly wisdom and you're going to try to own it, it's not going to happen in one reading. The way I understand it, 6 or 7 times, 4 times is what allows you to understand the problem. By the 5th, 6th, and 7th time, that's when you're starting to understand the solution. And maybe the 8th, 9th, 10th time, you're starting to being able to apply it. Now, when you finish learning something, now you got to close your eyes and think about it. That's what you have to do. You finish, you learned it. Now think about it. That's meditation. And that's how you break free from exile. This is a very clear, practical guidance as to how to break free from exile. I was very frustrated when I was in yeshiva. You study with yeshiva partners. Chavrusas, it's called. I was very frustrated. My study partner was late. He was leaving early. He had to go. He had to come. I was like, wait, can we just learn from beginning to end? And then at one point, I must have matured. I realized, you know what? I'm going to celebrate the times that he's not here. I'm going to celebrate that when he's not here. Like, oh, you want to go? Fantastic. Because now I was able to meditate on what we had just learned together. And I would actually look forward to the times that he wasn't there. And this is really the essence of what davening is all about. It's very, very difficult to repeat the same words every single day in prayer over and over and over and over again. It's very, very difficult. I don't know how people do it. But if you meditate before davening, then those words of davening become portals of light. They become portals of light that transport you to a different dimension. That is what davening is all about.
Is prayer meditation?
Absolutely, yes. Prayer is meditation. And if you didn't know that, and I think that most Jews don't know that,
Yep.
then it's not surprising that you've never been inspired to pray.
Yeah.
It's not surprising in the slightest bit. How many times can you ask for the same thing over? Right? It's like the guy that's interviewed by CNN. He come to the Western Wall. It's 2017. It's 50 years from the liberation of the Western Wall, the 6-Day War. And they find a Jew there who's been praying 3 times a day at the Western Wall for 50 years. 50 years. They come and they say to him, how do you feel? Well, so they say, what have you been praying for 50 years? He says, I pray for peace in the Middle East. And how do you feel like after 50 years of praying 50 years of praying 3 times a day? I feel like I'm talking to a wall.
Jokes are also good the 10th time around.
Well, it depends. Yeah, it depends. There's a rule for rabbis, and there's a rule for rabbis. My father's a rabbi, so I learned that a joke you can only repeat a joke like once a year. A rabbi can only repeat a joke like once because I'll remember it. A story you can repeat like once in 6 months because I'll remember it. But it's VaDor, like a pearl of Torah wisdom. You could repeat it twice in the same sermon, they wouldn't remember.
We got a congregation that listens to them.
Well, yeah, it depends. All right, so back to Chassidus. So I want to impress upon you the beauty of davening as meditation. What that means is you come to shul, and now I'm talking to myself, folks. You come to shul early. I know I don't. And you're supposed to close your eyes and think. You put your talis tefillin on, get in your tefillin and talis, and then you just sit down. Now you don't talk about how much the latest discussion in the congressional hearings. You don't talk about which is the newest anti-Semitism campus, who's going to win the award. We should make like a list of the most anti-Semitic countries, most anti-Semitic campuses. We don't talk about that. You just sit down and you mind your own business and you think about Chassidus. That's what you do. You can actually take a book with you and you read a page. That's what I do. I take a page of Tanya and I read it and then I meditate on it. Now, in my defense, by the way, by the time I get to shul, I've already woken up or much earlier at home, and I've done it before the kids wake up. But if I'm lucky, I have to tiptoe out of my bedroom to be able to, get between the kids. But most of the days, I can figure that out. But this is how you're supposed to daven. And if you can think for 2-3 minutes or 5 minutes before davening to focus one meditation on a topic, what's going to happen is that you're going to bring your intellect alive. And what's going to happen is an amazing thing's going to happen. What's going to happen is that you're going to start to feel something in your heart. It's actually amazing to watch this. It's like giving birth. I mean, not like giving birth, but it's sort of like giving birth. You're making something happen.
You're not quite as expert on that.
Yeah. I tried that once.
You are, but not really an expert. It's a good metaphor.
Yeah, it's like creating something. It's like conceiving something. And what happens is that you start to feel a feeling in your heart. When you focus your thoughts on something, on one topic for a while, soon you'll start, and if you're good, you can keep up the thought. Don't get distracted by the feeling. Keep the thought up. Keep the thought up, and you'll notice that you're stoking the flames of an emotion. And now an emotion comes to life. It could be hate. It could be love. It could be fear. It could be trust. There's a lot of different emotions that we have. We have 7 different emotions. But what's gonna like the notes on a piano, you're gonna start to play your emotions because you're holding the reins of the horse, right? And what's gonna happen is that your animal soul is gonna start getting excited. It's a beautiful experience. I was talking to a kid recently. I was trying to convince him to do something, and this kid is a very, very smart kid. And he says to me, "But Rabbi, I don't understand why I have to do it." And I realized that this kid, so smart, that if I could explain to him why, then he'll do it. But until he doesn't understand why, he's not going to do it. Because that's just his psychological profile. Yeah, sounds like Shalom. Exactly, Shalom's the same way. So if I could just explain to him exactly why he needs to do this, and I was struggling to explain it to him, admittedly, I was. But I figured, I'm going to put you in touch with another person, and he's going to explain to you. And that was my deal with this kid. And that person's hopefully going to be able to explain it to him so that he can do what he has to do. This is it. I thought it was a very honest reflection, like a real profile of a human being where the brain controls the emotion. And by the way, the emotion controls the action. Let's take a look at this idea in the words of Chassidus as we hopefully wrap it up here today. We're on page 365 at the part that I was a little confused about a few days ago. 365 at the bottom of the page, Andy.
Thank you.
Second to last paragraph, man's natural tendencies are reflected in his emotions, which means your natural tendencies, which is like your behavior, is controlled by your emotions. We therefore observe that he who has refined corporeal tendencies will have refined emotions as well, while he who possesses gross tendencies will have gross or sometimes corrupt emotions. So which controls which? The tendencies control the emotions, or the emotions control the tendencies? I think that the emotions control the tendencies. The wording is a little funny here. Generally, but that's not the part I want to get stuck on. Bottom of the page. Generally, emotions are refined by intellect, as the verse states in Proverbs, King Solomon's wisdom, according to one's man's To one's intellect will a person be praised. Kifi sichla yuhul alish. According to your intellect will a man be praised. A person's emotional conduct, whether coarse or refined, good or evil, generally reflects his intellect. Your emotions are a product, your actions are a product of your emotions, but your emotions are a product of your intellect. We observe that a child, since his intellect is not yet fully developed, desires petty things, while an adult, whose intellect is more fully developed, desires more useful things. Note the word more useful things, because sometimes adults are just big grown-up kids who desire big toys like big cars versus little cars. Big bulls versus little bulls, right? So too concerning different adults. The more intellectually developed the person, the more refined are his emotional traits. Now you got to ask yourself at your advanced age, whatever age you're at, you are today the oldest you've ever been in your whole life. Agreed?
Yep.
You've never been this wise. You've never been this mature as you are today, not even yesterday. Now the question is, what score do you grade in your spiritual maturity? Maturity. What is your aspiration? Are you after just physical stuff? Pretty much like a kid is. Kids like lollipops. Grown-up kids like money, so they can buy a lot of lollipops, such as Maseratis and McLarens, right? Right? Or are you someone that's more refined? Maybe you have your desires for music. Or maybe your desires for love. Or maybe your desires is for influence. You know, people like, you look at Bernie Sanders. The guy's clearly not into his hairstyle or anything, right? But or Albert Einstein's not into his hairstyle, but he's into influence. I mean, agree with him or not, love him or hate him, it doesn't matter. This is a person that's running for a 4th term right now, and he's committed to having an impact with his own political views. This is what this guy's all about, right? You got to give him a little respect for that, you know, whether you agree or disagree with him, right? The guy clearly is not obsessed with his materialistic concerns. Now, you can rise higher than that, depending on your intellectual makeup, on whether or not you've chosen to engage your intellect actively. It's an active intervention to say, today I'm going to meditate. I'm going to spend 5 minutes today thinking about something I learned. And the way to meditate is three steps. Very simple. You pick something you like. That's number one. You identify a topic. Then in Chassidus, I'm pushing you, please take a topic in Chassidus, because if you're going to meditate on a piece of Talmud, I mean, like, seriously, you're going to meditate on whether the horse had a saddle, didn't have a saddle. It's like a legal thing. It's not going to work for you. Chassidus is beautiful meditational material. Find something you like. Maybe you heard a sermon or something. Ask me, where's that from? Where can I read that? Right? Where can I read more about it? And then take this thing that you're learning and read it 10 times. Write notes on the side. Write it up in your own words. Think about it. Have a cup of coffee over it. Right? Talk about it to someone you love. And what's going to happen is, at some point, you're going to start feeling comfortable enough to close your eyes and think about it. Now, intellect is thus the light that illuminates the path of the emotions. Intellect causes a person to realize what is a good trait, something that should be developed, and how to acquire it. Intellect also calls attention to evil traits and informs the individual that they must be eliminated. Thus, intellect not only instructs a person on how to rid himself of evil traits, but also teaches how a good trait must be substituted in its place. You know, you look at these college campus kids. How many of them have actually thought about what they're protesting for? I mean, think about it. You talk to them, these interviews are just beyond idiotic. They're like, which river? Don't know. Which sea? I don't know. What about the hostages? I don't care about the hostages. You know, it's like, what are you smoking? There's like no intellectual activity going on over there. They're actually they're coaching them now to refuse any interviews because they're so pathetic, right? There's somebody, I saw a video yesterday of some woman, American woman, debating with a former Hamas operative. He's now become like an FBI informant. Yeah. And she's lecturing him about the morality of Hamas. And he's like, are you out of your mind? Like, you're going to lecture me? He's the son of Hamas. Yeah, he's the son of Hamas. He's like, you're going to lecture me about the morality of Hamas? You American living in your ivory tower, right? He came to Gaza to have a falafel, maybe, right? I grew up over there. I know the corruption, right? And I'm telling you that they're corrupt, and you're going to lecture me that they're...
I posted that clip.
Oh yeah. So maybe that's what I saw. But anyways, point is that there's like no intellectual processing going on. It's all emotions leading the intellect in these college campus kids, right? And if they would actually grow up a little bit, then they would realize like, oh, if they would think about it, they'd be like, 1 second. Yeah, because there's some bill somebody's proposing, some senators proposing to actually send all these kids that are convicted to Gaza for 6 months of community service, right?
Yeah.
You could fix it up, right?
At the University of Texas, when they cleaned up all the debris, they found printed material from Hamas.
Oh, wow, amazing.
Yeah, Hamas has been active in this country.
They had,
Absolutely.
Well, we knew that Hamas hides behind schools. We just didn't realize that the schools they were hiding behind was college campuses in America. Okay, essentially, let's wrap it up. Man's desire to possess good emotional and character traits, and not even ones. That's your desire as a human being. A human being despises falsehood, conceit, jealousy, evil, gossip, slander, and the like. Nevertheless, various things can have a strong effect on him, such as gross natural tendencies or an evil environment. That would be nature and nurture, right? That is Egypt. That is bondage. That is slavery. Because your animal soul just dominates. Your horse is like sitting on the rider, and the rider can't breathe. These strengthen man's evil traits and diminish his desire for good ones. But here is the bottom line. Intellect is therefore termed light. If Egypt is darkness, then it's intellect, which is your light. For it illuminates the emotions. This is the spiritual service of exile and redemption. Here it is. So beautiful. The animal soul is your exile, which is constricting your godly soul as it does. Your godly soul is like on life support, can't breathe. Your average Jew that is like disconnected or not openly connected to shul or Jewish spirituality or something, and they think they're okay, their godly soul is like on life support. It's in a state of a coma. When the godly soul succeeds in refining it, that's when redemption is achieved. Number one, you have to know that you're sick, that you're in exile. That's what we learned in this discourse. Number two, what is that exile? That exile is that your animal soul is dominating over your godly soul. Your horse is sitting on top of the rider instead of the rider sitting on top of the horse. We got to fix the situation. Okay, how do we do that? Equine therapy. What you do is you got to search yourself. You got to believe in yourself, and you got to approach the horse with confidence. How do you do that? With intellect. By mustering your thoughts, having the courage to actually actively think. Thoughts are like laser beams. Thoughts, what's the power of one single thought? It's like the power of one light wave, like one light wave. Doesn't do much. But if you focus light waves in one specific direction, it can burn through steel. Laser. If you focus your thoughts in one direction, all those thoughts, thousands of thoughts in one direction, it will change your life. And that, my friends, is the pathway out of Egypt. Maybe I'll conclude with a story, famous story, Chassidic story of Rabbi Moshe Meisels, who was a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe, and he was, it's famously known that the Alter Rebbe was very much opposed to Napoleon when Napoleon invaded Russia in the Russian-Franco War of 1812, and so whereas other Jewish leaders supported the French because they believed in in freedom of religion, the Russians, who did not believe in freedom of religion, was supported by the Alter Rebbe for reasons which I don't want to get into right now. Anyway, so what happened was that Moshe Meisels was bilingual or trilingual. He spoke Yiddish, French, and Russian. So he volunteered to become a Russian translator. And he's a smart man. He reached the highest echelons of the Russian of the French camp of Napoleon's inner circle. But he was really a double agent because he was supporting the Alter Rebbe, supporting the Russians. At one point, Napoleon was very frustrated that every time that they planned an attack somewhere, the Russians were ready. He realized that there was a leak in the highest echelons, so he storms into the headquarters. And as he storms in, he goes straight up to Moshe Meisels, puts his hand on his heart like this, and he puts his hand on his heart on Moshe Meisels, and he says, "You're a spy." Now, if that was me, even if I wasn't a spy, I'd be flipping out, okay? But Moshe Meisels wasn't flipping out. He maintained his composure. And he said, "I'm not a spy." And he said, "I'm loyal to you," whatever. Later on, Chassidim, and Napoleon believed him because his heart was not racing. Later on, Chassidim asked him, "How did you manage to maintain your composure under such stressful circumstances? How is your adrenaline not pumping? That to the point that you could feel your heart wasn't racing." Says Rabbi Moshe Meisels, is this not the first thing that the Alter Rebbe taught us, that Mayach Shalit Alalev, that the mind controls the heart? Is this not the first thing that the Alter Rebbe taught us? Which means Moshe Meisels wasn't just a chassid, by culture. This guy was a chassid in his physiology, to the point that his adrenaline depended on on his mental convictions. He obviously had prepared for this moment, because he was obviously on alert that he might have been captured as a spy at any moment. So he was meditating constantly that at any time he could have been accused of being a spy, and he needed to use his intellect to control his composure. That's a chassid in action. So right now we're facing fearful circumstances. Americans are withholding aid from Israel. What's going to be? What's going to be? Will Israel have what it needs to survive? Never fear. Hashem yilachem lachem ve'atem tacharishun. God will fight on your behalf, and you shall be silent. All that you need to do, said Moses, before the crossing of the Red Sea, when the Jews were in an impossible situation, with the Egyptians in hot pursuit and the Red Sea before them, the wilderness on either side, they had nowhere to go. They were stuck between a rock and a hard place. Moses says, all you need to do is do what God tells you. So just go. Just proceed. That's all you need to do. Right now, fear is our enemy. Walk away from fear. Intellect, meditate on Hashem's protection over us. Meditate on that point. And allow yourself to come to a state of equanimity, of absolute trust in Hashem. And Hashem will bless us with miracles of epic proportion. Thank you very much. This concludes the discourse. We'll continue with another discourse. If you have any comments on the style of Chassidus, let me know. Thank you. Harvey, we did a quick something with you if you don't mind.